Hello, I'm Carwyn Jones, and welcome to this series of podcasts where I interview Wales's movers and shakers. What's their background? What's their view on their current business, and how do they see Wales developing in the future? And I'm very glad to be joined today by Councillor Huw Thomas, the leader of Cardiff Council. Huw, croeso mawn, you're very welcome on the podcast today. Now, Huw, many people would be interested in your background. You're an Aberystwyth boy originally, and you went to Oxford to study music.
That's right, yeah.
So what do you play? What instruments?
A bit of everything, to be honest. My main instrument back then was a double bass, with a bit of bass guitar thrown in as a bonus, but then piano and voice as well. So at one point, when I was probably 15, 16, I thought I was thinking seriously about being a professional double bass player. And then I thought, well, a bit of self-reflection. You may not have the stick to practice 5-6 hours a day. So maybe study it as academically, and then at least you've got some transferable skills then if you decide not to pursue it. And of course, as things turned out, that's what happened.
Well, I've had the difficult pleasure of standing next to you several times where I've been asked to sing, and had to listen to your. Well, you've got quite a range actually in terms of your voice, so it's quite intimidating. So I have been reduced to just mouthing words because otherwise I just sound flat next to you. So I have heard you sing, and I can certainly confirm the fact that you're a tremendous singer. So music in Oxford, you were a rower as well?
I was. Yeah. Not a particularly good one as things turned out, but I threw myself into a lot of things when I was in university. I absolutely loved it. Apart from maybe the academic stuff, to be honest, but it was a fantastic experience, and you do all sorts. Yeah.
And a real change then, master's degree in Aberystwyth, a wise move to that institution, of course, and a real change in study from music to international relations. What was the reason behind that?
Well, I finished university, and I think I was thinking probably like most people, you're going to have to end up in London to get a job, but I didn't have anything lined up, and a couple of friends of mine who were also from Aberystwyth, who'd also studied at Oxford, were saying, we found this master's course, international politics, and I looked at it, and they didn't have a prerequisite in terms of the degree you studied, and I thought that's probably going to be a really good way for me to diversify away from music into something that's a bit more real worldly. And of course, it was a chance to kind of spend the year back home with my parents as well. My mum wasn't very well at the time as well, so it was a nice conflation of needs coming together.
And then into the wider world, where your first job was with Congestion, or Airbus as most of us would know it as. 3 years there as a bid manager, 4 years there as a bid manager and a project manager. What was the nature of your job there? Tell us what you're able to tell us.
So I started off as a kind of business graduate scheme, basically, and I'm not sure what they thought about a music graduate applying for them, but I managed to persuade them. This was down in Newport, Junction 28. So that's what brought me down to South Wales, really, and been living in Splot ever since then. Fantastic kind of communication security, kind of lead system integration is what they call it. So big IT projects, and working on some really high-end technical stuff. Project management. You're basically telling the experts what to do, which was a slightly incongruous situation for somebody who's 2 years out of university, but. Hugely enjoyable, and that company remains a big asset to Wales. Okay,
and then Sustrans, another great change in terms of your career. You then went to work as a project manager for Sustrans for 3 years.
Yeah, so you're definitely seeing it's not a particularly planned out career path.
Varied,
very eclectic, I like to say.
Very good, yes.
I think at the time I was getting more and more interested in politics, and I was already a candidate at that point for the local elections in 2012, and I thought. Sustrans have got a lot of links with local councils. Pretty good way to build up my network. So made the switch over to them, and he was Lee Waters at the time, now a deputy minister in government, then head of Sustrans. So he was my boss then. And 2 months after getting the job, I then became elected myself. But fair play, they were very flexible in allowing me some leeway to do some work in politics.
So what sort of projects did you manage?
So I was project managing a concept called personalised travel planning, and you like this as a politician. This was basically knocking doors. So it was going out, knocking doors. I think we knocked something like 70,000 doors in Cardiff, and another 40-odd thousand spread across Pontypridd and Caerphilly, and then Bangor around the Menai Straits. And we were employing staff, and they were offering the people they were knocking the doors of, have you thought about travelling sustainably to work? And we had a range of information, timetables, maps, etc., to then offer them and deliver it to them. So it's quite an effective methodology that delivers an increase in people travelling sustainably.
You mentioned you were elected in May 2012 for Splot,
and
you have been the councillor ever since. But in May 2015, another change, something again very different, as the head of Christian Aid Wales. What took you to Christian Aid?
Well, I mean, I'm a practicing Christian, and always had a lot of love for that organisation. And I've been standing as the parliamentary candidate in the general election that year for Ceredigion. Let's not talk about that. And kind of recognising, I was in effect a paper candidate, and I just finished my time with Sustrans, looking for something to do, and this opportunity opened up, and I thought, well, I'm not sure if I'm qualified or not, but I'll put my name down. And the interview went well. I remember what is now Archbishop John Davis in the interview asking me, what happens were you to win the Ceredigion seat? Would you still take the job with Christian Aid? And I said, well, I'm not a betting man, Your Grace, but if you were, the odds are 100 to 1 that I'm going to win in Ceredigion. So I don't think there's much chance of that.
A realist.
yeah.
That time, but good experience. I'm sure at the stand as a candidate.
It
always is. And then you spent your time with Christian Aid. Give us an idea of the kind of work that Christian Aid does on the ground in Wales.
So in Wales in particular, it's very much about campaigning and maintaining really good, strong relationships with the churches. So what I was always struck by is just how much actual on the ground activity there are by volunteers by Christian Aid. So when there's a disaster relief emergency in parts of the world, Christian Aid is one of the few organisations that can actually mobilise big numbers of volunteers to do bucket collections or to raise awareness, to raise funding. Then, of course, we were campaigning on issues like climate change, like tax justice. Back in the day, they were very much behind the kind of the Jubilee debt campaign. But then all the delivery work, if you like, is done overseas. So I think in about 40 countries, Africa, South America, and Asia.
And then in May of 2017, you received the call to become leader of Cardiff Council. At that time, what were you, 31, 32?
31, I think I was,
so
yeah.
Very, very young.
Yeah.
And somebody who was taking over a council that had seen a little bit of difficulty in terms of turmoil and now stable. What were your feelings when you became leader at such a young age?
Well, again, it wasn't something that was on the career path, frankly. Particularly because the Christian Aid opportunity was such a fantastic job, and I felt like I was making a difference there. So it wasn't really on the plan. And then, as you said, Cardiff Council, particularly the Labour group, had been through a difficult period where some histories going back 30 years had become entrenched, and one side could cure cancer and the other side would reject it because it was the wrong side who'd come up with it. And somebody said to me, you're the person who can bring this together, you should stand. So I allowed my name to go forward, and then as things happened, won the election within the Labour group. And you don't turn down the chance to lead the capital city of Wales, do you, at whatever age? So I guess I was very conscious about the rebuilding that needed to be done internally, but I was also really excited about the opportunity it offered to make change in the capital city of Wales.
I think you're right there. You have to take the opportunity when it's offered. I was a minister at 33, and when I was 33, foot and mouth arrived. And it is quite, it's a steep learning curve, but you have to do it. And if you come out of it well, then it sets you up for the future. If you come out of it badly, it's very difficult when you're that young.
Yes.
So I'm with you. You have to take an opportunity when it arises. I do remember the difficulties that existed at the time.
Well,
I was trying to deal with it.
Yes, quite. But, you were a part player in them, weren't you?
In terms of well, I say part player. Picking up the mediator, I think is the word I'd use, rather than part player. Yeah. Okay. So, and you become the full-time leader of Cardiff Council in 2017 in May, and you finish in Christian Aid in July, roughly, of 2017, and been the leader of Cardiff Council, of course, from then on. So, what I'd like to do now is just to get your ideas about what's happening in Cardiff at the moment. Lots of things, obviously, but a lot of our listeners won't be familiar with Cardiff and what's going on here. Perhaps I could start with drawing on your experience working for Sustrans and the need to promote sustainable travel in the capital. One of the issues that has been that you promoted is the issue of more cycle paths, perhaps making it easier for people to ride a bike without having to come into contact with cars, which for a lot of people is a difficult thing. What sort of work is going on at the moment to introduce safe and good routes for walking and cycling in the capital?
A huge amount. Now, I remember you yourself, Carwyn, I think, saying when you were First Minister,
I did
that you wouldn't be safe cycling in.
I wouldn't have felt well because I'm getting on now, and I can see, no. I think the issue is that for a lot of people, there are some very confident cyclists who are happy to be on the road with cars, but for a lot of people, one of the biggest obstacles that they feel is there for them is that they don't want to be on the sharing space.
Yeah, no,
motor vehicles. Yeah.
I'm not saying that critically, but I remember it making headlines at the time.
Well, and those are the days, eh?
And responding to that kind of concern is exactly what we're trying to do. And I guess particularly when people are thinking about could we take our kids out on a bike, it is something that puts them off. And even myself, now that suddenly I've got a 5-month-old baby now, I'm thinking differently about it as well. So we've got quite ambitious plans, and they're in the process of now being implemented to construct probably 5 cycleways, what you'd recognise in London as cycle superhighways. So these are segregated 2-way lanes, separated from the traffic that you can cycle safely on. And the idea is to have a ring around the city centre, and then 5 of these would branch out in different directions, north, south, and west, and whatever.
And in terms of transport infrastructure and integrating transport, of course, there's the bus station being rebuilt in the city centre. When is that due to open?
2022 is when we're targeting. It's a protracted history to that project, as you'll know, Carwyn. I think when the station itself was first closed back in 2010. I think it suffered then about having not having a coherent plan for what was going to happen on that site. And then obviously when Labour came to power in the council in 2012, we implemented a plan, but it's not been a straightforward process either, partly because of debate about whether the bus station would go north or south of the station of the railway tracks, and then how do you fund it? Is the other question, and part of what's not been straightforward is finding investors to then fund, in effect, what goes above the bus station. But all that's done now. There will be further news coming, I think, which will confirm to people why we took that time to get the right investor above, and people understand that in terms of the job creation that comes when that's announced. But yeah, the idea is 2022, 2023, you'll have an integrated bus node, which then connects with a train station, the busiest train station in Wales, that we've also secured funding for now.
And of course, there is a need to revamp Cardiff Central. It's not a cheap option, and it's for Network Rail ultimately. But we know that there are going to be capacity issues there in the future. Like 11 million passengers go through that year at the moment, and that'll go up to 30 million over the next few decades. We know the station can't cope. So,
the studies show, what is today is match day volumes. When there's a game in the stadium, will be the reality every day, every weekday, by the middle of this decade. So we're quite clear, and I know Welsh Government is quite clear, there has to be investment into the station. As you said, it's Network Rail's problem, really. But it's really our problem, because if we don't fix it, it's the economy of Cardiff, it's the people of Cardiff and South Wales who suffer. So that's why as a council, we've constructed an investment program into that station, secured some money from City Deal to it, whilst government in turn have come to the table with a significant contribution. It's not a devolved area, but they're supporting it. And then finally last year we secured the top up we needed from Department for Transport. But it was hard work getting there, I'll have to say. And they're getting a good deal. Something that would be costing them 200 million to do. They're only having to put 60 million in.
And when will that work begin? Any timescale?
My expectation is it would transition. So as soon as the work on the bus station completes, you'd carry on and go through and do the train station. So around 2022.
And of course, what's proposed in the future is that trams may well return to the city centre, or tram trains along the lines of what Manchester has got. Has any thought been given to what kind of routes those trams might take?
Yeah, so we published a transport plan, a white paper for transport in the city 2 weeks ago now. That was building on a green paper that we held in 2018, very extensive consultation. And it was kind of recognising, really, well, on the one hand, transport makes or breaks cities. If you haven't got effective transport, you haven't got a working city. And that really, transport in Cardiff isn't working. People spend double the time in cars that they would, on off-peak traffic. You haven't got an effective network for public transport. So what do we need to do to fix this? And the vision we've launched. If you have a chance to look at it, and it's all on the council website, you'll find in there a kind of a metro map just for the city, and it looks like a grown-up city. Then, with tram links up from the centre, in effect a Cardiff Crossrail, so up from the centre to the northwest, to Craigie, and then out through the bay, through the docks, beyond Splot to St Mellons, connecting up with Cardiff Parkway in the east. We've got ambitions to link up the Circle line with the City line around Rada, and then supplement that with a number of bus routes, that are made effective with bus lanes. So it's a really ambitious plan, probably £1 to £2 billion, finger in the air type figure. So we've also had to be honest with people. How are we going? That is not something we can fund given current budgets. Clearly, there is an ask of Welsh Government, but what other modes can we look at to fund this? Which is why you're going to ask me next about the congestion charge, I imagine.
Well, I was going to, but before that, I was going to say that, of course, in the part of the city that you represent, in fact, the whole eastern part of the city has been poorly served traditionally, hasn't it, by the rail network particularly. And you mentioned there the steps that you're taking to link up. I mean, St Mellons Parkway is a great project, but of course there's a need to link people to that station from other parts of the eastern part of the city.
Yeah, so if you're living in St Mellons, Llanrumney, Rumney, these are some of the poorest parts of South Wales, frankly. And yet, even though you live in Cardiff, it can take you an hour by public transport to get into the city centre. So the Cardiff Parkway project. So this is the brand new train station on the Great Western Main Line. Under the relief networks in St Mellons, that should be built again 2022, 2023 time, which is going to be 7-minute train journeys into the central Cardiff from St Mellons. I think that gives a huge opportunity, not just for the people locally, but also you build a big car park there, and you're taking a lot of the traffic coming into the city from the east off the road. It's really exciting.
Now, it was you who mentioned the congestion charge, so I'm going to ask you about that. Obviously, it's something that's been in the news recently. Give us an idea of the thinking behind it and how it might operate.
So, we're not wedded to a congestion charge solution. It's very much about here's a transport vision. What are the various ways of funding this? And one of them, I think, would be a congestion charge. In our minds, this wouldn't be a kind of a prohibitive charge on the scale that maybe London is, where it's 10, £15. Something probably lower, around the £2-3 mark. What we're really trying to target is commuters coming into the city from outside. So if you live in Cardiff, you're working in Cardiff, 50% roughly of those kinds of people will use sustainable transport, walking, cycling, or public transport to get to work. If you're driving in from outside the city, And I won't ask you, Carwyn, how you did today.
I came in by train, actually.
You came very good, very good. Well, you're one of the exceptions.
We're in the city centre, and it's quite early in the morning, and the train is by far the better option rather than spending probably an hour and a half in the car.
Exactly. But if you are driving in, 80% of the people coming into the city to work drive. That's 80,000 cars a day coming into Cardiff. We've got a road infrastructure that's probably designed for a city of about 200,000. But with that commuter swell as well, every day we become a city of 500,000 people. So something has to change.
And in terms of other projects that are happening in the city at the moment, give our listeners a flavour of what's going on.
Well, where do you start? So probably the big ticket item is the indoor arena that is progressing up to the point where we take a decision. We're finally going to build it. This would be a 15,000 capacity arena, like they've got in Manchester, like they've got in Glasgow, the hydro there. And it's we're very conscious on this issue in particular. We're in competition with Bristol. There isn't this kind of venue in South Wales or the southwest of England at the moment. So I think who gets there first, gets to that market for music events, but also sport and culture. And the idea is you locate this in Cardiff Bay, and this becomes another anchor destination then in Cardiff Bay, providing employment for the people who live there, providing spill-off benefits for the bars and restaurants that are already there, and also providing some of the footfall that you'd want for that metro link, that tram link between the bay and the city centre. So that's probably the biggest project. Overall, you're talking about probably about £500 million of development value in that project. So we'd be looking for investment partners to come in on board and work with us to deliver that. You've then got a council house building scheme. So you'll know, Carwyn, Welsh Government suspended right to buy. So councils could apply to do that. Cardiff did. And that, in effect, unlocks our ability to build council houses, again, at scale. So by 2022, next council election, we'll have built 1,000 council houses in Cardiff, which is probably the first time we've done it on that kind of scale since the 80s. We're very conscious Cardiff is a growing city. At the moment, we've got 8,000 people on the housing waiting list for affordable housing. So that council house construction scheme goes a long way, I think, towards achieving this. And then we've got the investment we're putting into education. Again, part funded through Welsh Government 21st Century School Projects programme. This is about renewing the education estate in the city. £300 million being spent over the next 5 years, rebuilding 5 new high schools in the city. And that's really important for me because we know there are huge levels of poverty in Cardiff. Often goes unnoticed because you've also got wealth in the city, but you take the southern arc of Cardiff, it's the biggest single area of deprivation in South Wales. And we're saying that the best route out of poverty is through a good education that gets you into a good job, which is why that investment into the school estate is so important.
You can't help but notice the number of homeless people in Cardiff. It's not unique to Cardiff, of course. It's a problem that we have in so many places, people sleeping in tents on the street. I was going to take your view on what we could do to help those people. I spent some time with the Salvation Army, and they made the point to me, well, look, it's not simply a question of saying, here's some accommodation, go in there. Some of these people have got multiple problems. Some have dogs, they're not allowed to take dogs in. They have drug and alcohol problems. And for some people, so the Salvation Army said to me, they feel safer on the street than in a hostel. I mean, what sort of thought has been given to, and it's not easy because each individual is different, but what sort of thought's been given to how we could try to help those people who are on the street at the moment and try to reboot their lives?
Yeah, as you suggested, it's a hugely complex issue, and each case is different. So the council runs an outreach team that are out there, every day of the year, through the night, reaching out to these people, trying to encourage them to come in. They can do a housing assessment there and then with the individuals. And I can tell you stories from when we had the snow 2 years ago. They were out there trying to persuade some members of the homeless community to come into the shelters, and they were still refusing. So there are very complex reasons why somebody might turn that help down in that situation. So we've been looking at, we've been out to Helsinki, we've been up to Glasgow to see what other cities in the UK and worldwide are doing in tackling the issue. actually, I'm pleased to be able to say at the moment the number of street homeless in Cardiff is the lowest it's been for 6 years. But that's in the context of a national trend where numbers have been going up and up since 2010. So there are a number of projects, the Housing First initiative being one. We've now got some temporary shipping containers online in Ely, and also some being built at the top of Bute Street, so to give people some immediate accommodation as they transition into long-term accommodation. Now, unfortunately, I can give you, examples of somebody who's been rehoused 20 times, and each time that placement has broken down. So that's not going to work overnight, and in each case. But there are a number of interventions, taking place that hopefully enable people to get off the street. And unfortunately, there is an element of some of the people you see on the street aren't homeless, and so there is that element as well. So that's why we've created the Give Differently scheme, for example, to give people the option, if they want to donate financially, they're able to do so, but knowing that their money will go right to the people who need it.
So you've got people out there who are not homeless. What, they're being taken advantage of by other people, or they just? Well, how do you know they're not homeless?
So the police, for example, undertook an operation last year, and particularly to clamp down on what they would term as aggressive begging. And I think there were, I remember being told the figures at one point during that operation, there'd maybe been 17 arrests. 16 of those people had addresses. Do be wary. And I certainly used to give my money to the person on the street, but I think, having seen some of the statistics around it, my advice would now be give to a homeless charity or give through the Give Differently scheme.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's look at the future. What's the future for Cardiff? What do you see in the next decade the capital city doing? How will it develop? We've mentioned some of the challenges, such as transport infrastructure. You mentioned the indoor arena. If I was to say to you, in the next 10 years, what would you like to see happening in the city? What would your answer be?
So I think delivering that transport vision, I think is fundamental. I come back to the fact you can't have a successful city unless you've got a successful transport infrastructure to underpin it. That's so important for businesses. That's so important for people who we are trying to persuade to invest in the city, to bring jobs for the city, because that's one of the key things that they look at. But I think we also want to be concentrating on quality of life for the people of Cardiff, and I think we also need to get serious about climate change. If we don't act now, we as a society have left it to the very last moment. If we don't act now, then there is going to be irreparable damage caused to communities across the world. When I was working for Christian Aid, I saw some communities that were already being affected by climate change. So I'm very keen that as a city we get serious about how we respond to that challenge as well. So I think I'd like to see a greener, more sustainable city where people, behave, in a way that supports their environment, but also one I would hope where that inequality that persists between the south and the north part of the city is being addressed, and where the gap is finally being closed is what I'd like to see in 10 years' time.
And let's broaden that out then. Over the next decade, what would you like Wales to look like?
Very similar, I guess. It's odd, isn't it? You mentioned I'm from Aberystwyth originally, so whenever I go back to Aberystwyth, any kind of change to Aberystwyth, I'm very sceptical about. Why is this area that I've known for 35 years changing? I'm not sure I like that. But I think all communities across Wales need to respond to the climate emergency that is facing them. I would like to see in particular, I think that we're on track to hit that million figure of Welsh speakers across the country. One of the issues I'm very aware of is how communities in rural Wales are under pressure. I can from where I live in Splot, there's probably a dozen people who were in the same year as me in school. Within half a mile. That's going to have an impact, in those communities back home. So what can we do to reinvigorate those communities back in West and North Wales as well. And that's why we want to be a capital city that works for Wales as well.
And what next for Huw Thomas?
Who knows?
I don't give you the answer. I have no ambitions. That's the answer I gave many times when I was your age. In terms of where you'd like to go in the future, what challenges you'd like to take on, what would they be?
Well, I often get asked, have you thought about going to the Assembly or going into Westminster?
Have you thought about going to the Assembly?
I mean, the honest answer is yes. If you're in politics, you do look, at what you can do next. I would genuinely stress, and I'm not just saying this, but I do think being leader of Cardiff Council is one of the best jobs in Wales in terms of your ability to actually deliver and get things done. And I think particularly compared with maybe being a backbench member of Parliament who's maybe not, who is maybe in opposition, your ability to affect change is so much greater in this role. So I've got no plans at the moment to move away from this role because we've got a really exciting agenda. But who knows? It's a cliche, but all you ask is a chance to serve. And we've discussed it. When an opportunity opens up, you've got to take it, haven't you?
That's very true. It may not happen again, and that's one of the things I had to learn over the years. That you might say to yourself, "Well, is this the right time for me?" Quite often, that's not the question you've got to ask.
Yes.
The question has to be, will this opportunity ever come round again?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Councillor Huw Thomas, leader of Cardiff Council, it's been a great pleasure talking to you and listening about your plans for the city in the future. Exciting times ahead, and I'm sure we will, those of us who of course don't live in Cardiff, will look forward to seeing the capital city develop, not just as a capital city, but of course, as you said, for the whole of Wales. Huw, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Diolch yn fawr, Carwyn.